I have to begin with a correction. 2 weeks ago came word that Eva Longoria, the actress, had left the United States because of the Trump election. She was living in Mexico and Europe, commuting between the two. And it became a big national news story. It was all over. CNN ran a story on it. Multiple news outlets ran a story on it. But Eva Navarro, or Anna Navarro, is a friend of Eva Longoria's. And Anna Navarro, I know they're good friends. And Anna says it's not true. She was already living in Mexico. She's been living there for 3 years. It's not true. It appears, however, to be true that Ellen DeGeneres has left the country with Portia de Rossi. That they've moved to England. They've moved to England. Now, I got to say, though, there's a difference, I think, between actresses in Hollywood who are moving overseas because in their bubble, they believe the world has come to an end, because in the Hollywood bubble, you believe all sorts of bizarre things. And in the Hollywood bubble, everyone is convinced Donald Trump is the second coming of Hitler and the like. But it's different between them and a reporter. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution has begun to run an occasional series exploring people's decisions to leave the United States. And they have decided to start with Todd Kopilowitz. I don't know how you quite pronounce his last name, Todd Kopilowitz something. He describes himself as a marketing consultant, but not just any marketing consultant. He's a former reporter and columnist for the Dallas Morning News. And I want you to just listen to some of this. Growing up in the Midwest, I couldn't fathom how a nation could embrace someone like Hitler, or how America justified locking up 120,000 Japanese Americans in detention camps. I was raised to believe most people had a breaking point, a moral red line that once crossed would stop them. Now I know better. Fear, weaponized, simple scapegoats offered. The toxic cocktail blinds people. It happened in Germany, Bosnia, Myanmar, Cambodia, Stalin's Russia. Less than a month ago, my heart dropped like a lead weight. The nightmare came home. Fury and fear have been spinning in my head ever since. Donald Trump will soon be president again, this time with a MAGA-led Republican Congress and a rubber-stamped Supreme Court ready to greenlight whatever hateful agenda he couldn't finish the first time. He's armed and ready to bulldoze decency. For a horrified number of Americans, the misogyny, racism, and anti-Semitism didn't matter, or worse, they liked it. That's not just alarming, it's sickening. We're not in Kansas anymore. This is Nazi Germany territory. Wow. Wow. In our house, we've seen too much of the inhumanity humans are capable of. My wife spent years in combat zones as a TV photojournalist and video editor. And 2020, as journalists in the United States were beaten on live TV during the George Floyd protests, it was like a portal opening to her past. It wasn't the Trump administration, by the way, beating the journalists. More than anything, it was the protesters themselves attacking journalists. This is remarkable. This is remarkable. He spent a decade as a crime reporter and a decade helping the Marine Corps recruit young men and women. And yet he looks on the country and he doesn't recognize it. He was a reporter, but these are people poisoned by their own prejudices. And I need you to understand that. This guy views himself as the righteous one when he's actually the bad guy. Yes, he actually is the bad guy. He views his fellow Americans as dumb. He views his fellow Americans as willing to support an authoritarian. He truly believed democracy is under attack, as opposed to it's just another election. And by the way, Donald Trump, his first 2 years in office, also had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a conservative Supreme Court. And it was a pretty, when you get right down to it, normal Republican administration. If anything, Donald Trump this time has more progressives in his cabinet than he had last time. He's picked a guy who worked for George Soros. He's picked a woman who supports the Democrats' unionization beliefs, supports amnesty, and opposes school choice. Donald Trump's got a Democrat for Secretary of Health and Human Services, and his team just blocked one of the most pro-life professionals in the country from being in HHS. He's picked a celebrity doctor who supports gender transitions to be in charge of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. And you think that he's going to be some sort of Hitler come to town? This is the problem with these people. They believe their own BS. And it gets to the problem with reporters generally. Reporters are some of the most arrogant and lazy people. You talk to people in politics, you talk to people in the Jews generally, and what comes about largely when you get to these levels is you're being spoon-fed stories. They lack intellectual curiosity. This guy lacks intellectual curiosity. He doesn't want to know why people might have voted for Trump, nor does he want to understand how his own Supreme Court could block him. They don't want to do any of that. He just wants to believe his own prejudice. And his own prejudice is this: Americans are bad. It's why these Hollywood libs can leave the country. They don't like the United States. They don't like you and me. They live their cloistered existence in Hollywood, the left coast. And now suddenly they can't understand how anyone could have voted for Donald Trump. They really do believe. I bet this guy really does believe that everybody's economy is just fine. I bet this guy really believes all of the bad things. And in fact, he does. We're watching the fabric of our society, our culture get shredded in front of us. In Texas, they offer bounties for turning in women seeking abortions. That's not actually true. Across red states, cruelty is being legislated with zeal, banning water breaks for road crews, criminalizing compassion, targeting LGBTQ plus people as public enemies. Decency is a crime. Hate is a virtue. This is not my America. Now, what is this? Last year, Texas nabbed headlines for legislation that eliminated heat-related employer rules across municipalities, including rules mandating water breaks for outdoor workers in industries like construction. Dubbed the Death Star bill by critics, it led to a legal battle, but ultimately went into effect, meaning employers cannot be required to provide workers with outdoor water breaks or time in the shade to avoid potential heat-related illnesses. What exactly was this about? See, he's believing the worst, and you yourselves are probably duped. So what is this? Texas signed a law. It would eliminate mandatory water breaks for state construction workers. Why? Because in Austin, Texas, and Dallas, the progressives decided that every 10 minutes, every 4 hours, construction workers have to take a break. And what happened is it drove up compliance costs for the state. This doesn't apply to the private sector. It applies to local governments that were trying to exert themselves over state control. Now, obviously, if a worker needs water, they can take water. There's no problem. And this is part of the opposite concern, that this guy doesn't want to see, this guy doesn't want to hear, this guy doesn't want to understand. That these local governments decided to mandate every 4 hours, You got to have a 10-minute break. What the construction teams say is that obviously if a worker is thirsty, the worker can get water. But mandating every 4 hours, all work has to come to a stop for 10 minutes is inefficient because not every worker needs to stop every 4 hours for 10 minutes, that they should be able to stop as need be. And this only applies to state workers, and this is local governments slowing down construction development and making it one size fits all in a way they didn't need it. But this guy has internalized this, that this is some sort of abomination. No one banned water breaks for road crews, and that's what he writes. It's not actually true. No one banned water breaks. What they banned was shutting all work down for 10 minutes every 4 hours, which is ultimately what it amounted to. But he believes it, and you're not going to challenge him on it because he's convinced of his own righteousness, and that's the problem with progressives. You know, I can't separate my worldview from this. I believe there's a heaven and a hell and a God, and I'm supposed to be humble. I don't get everything right. These guys are convinced they get it all right, and you yourselves are the bad people. Neighbors are turning on neighbors, he writes. Cultural differences are being criminalized. Children are weaponized as pawns in deportation schemes. We're teetering on the edge of a free fall into rock bottom, pulling anyone with a shred of decency down with us. I'm glad this guy is leaving. Ironically, he's going to Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is a place where if you stand outside and preach the gospel, you might wind up in jail. Northern Ireland is also a place where if you say that men cannot become women or you say something critical on social media of the government, they can show up at your doorstep and arrest you. But he believes that's better than here. Because what this guy ultimately doesn't want is you. He's not really concerned about Donald Trump. He's concerned about you. He's decided he's superior. And that is the common theme of all these people fleeing the country, is they've decided that they're smarter than you. And they shouldn't have to put up with democracy. They shouldn't have to put up with your vote. They preach democracy all they want. But when they don't get their way, they take their football and flee. And I hope that he will make it a permanent stay and not just for the next 4 years. Because people like that are why so many Americans revolted and decided to stand with Donald Trump. They don't like these preachy progressives who insist that they're right and you're wrong and they win and you lose every time. His disgust with what happened is the same disgust we should hold for a man like that. So video shows up. It's a protest. And there are Palestinians in the streets, and there are people holding Russian flags, which I thought was interesting. And there are Jews in the street, and a woman in a mask wearing a Palestinian scarf starts calling for a final solution for the Jews in Montreal. Now, as you should know, the final solution is the Nazi language for the extermination of the Jews. And this woman is calling for a final solution against the Jews. Now, interestingly enough, she's got sunglasses on. She's wearing a COVID mask. She's got her head, so she's very, very anonymous. Someone followed her to see who she was. It turns out she runs a coffee shop inside the Jewish General Hospital of Montreal. The woman, her name's Maya, runs the coffee shop inside the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal and is in the streets, all covered up to be anonymous, calling for the extermination of Jews in Montreal. Second Cup is the coffee company in Montreal, Canada that she's affiliated with. They have canceled her franchise. They have shut her down. You know, I'm not big on cancel culture. When you have a woman in the streets calling for the extermination of Jews and she runs a coffee shop inside the Jewish General Hospital, it might not be a good fit for her or the people who might want a cup of coffee while they're visiting relatives in the hospital. Goodness gracious. People are broken, and the internet allows us so many opportunities to see that brokenness. Now, I got to tell you about Swiss America and the secret war on cash that's out there, because Swiss America has been trying to explain to people that the government is trying to make sure your anonymous cash purchases are not. It is a secret war on cash. Swiss America is rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. They've been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years in this country. Their report takes less than 15 minutes to read. All you have to do to get a free copy of it is call 800-289-2646. The all-out war on cash includes digital forms of currency as well. So you can get the Secret War on Cash report completely for free from Swiss America. Just mention my name, Erick, E-R-I-C-K, when you call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. You get the report completely for free. Just mention Erick, E-R-I-C-K, when you call or text 800-289-2646. One more time, 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. Yeah, so here's why I don't think that's going to happen, Edwin. Whether it's good or not to move to the gold standard, and even free market economists are divided on it. The Austrian school, very much so. The Friedman school, not so much. The reason is because essentially we have what's called fiat currency now, where all the countries got together and said we're going to set a value for our currency. We don't have enough gold to back the American dollar at this moment. It would actually wreak some havoc on our economy if we were to transition back. There are plenty of economists who have plans to transition back. I just don't think it's going to happen because no other country is going to do it. And if no other country is going to do it, it'll allow those countries to buy up gold reserves and mess with our economy. We got to do something, though. We have crossed $35 trillion in national debt. Over the weekend, we crossed $35 trillion in national debt. So Trump, what's his Treasury Secretary? Secretary Trump, it is, yes, Scott Bessent. Scott Bessent, it's an interesting choice. I don't know that a prior to Trump, the GOP would have an openly gay, married with kids Treasury Secretary. That has nothing to do with the job of Treasury Secretary. It's not relevant to it. I just don't know that prior to Trump, the GOP would have done it. It's kind of for all the yelling on the left, like that journalist who's moved to Northern Ireland. The idea that a guy like Trump would pick an openly gay, married with kids, Treasury Secretary, and to say he's some sort of conservative authoritarian despot setting back the lives of the gay community is kind of absurd. Scott Bessent worked for George Soros. That should be the red flag for Trump supporters. He worked for George Soros. He was one of Soros's right-hand guys. Now, I am told very reliably, that he's actually a very sharp pick and will do wonders to undermine Trump's protectionist agenda, which I like. I'm not a protectionist. I don't want tariffs, and Bessent apparently is an enemy of tariffs and will work to undermine them from within, which I am totally happy with. He was a Democratic donor and worked for Soros, though. It's a little bit wild. But I don't see he very much would not want to go to a gold standard, so I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, I want to shift from that to what Seth Moulton said. We've mentioned Seth Moulton here. Seth Moulton is a Democratic member of Congress from Massachusetts who said the Democrats need to get over this idea that boys should be in girls' sports, and was then protested. Peter Savadnik at the Free Press has this piece. In a parallel universe, progressives would be rallying around Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton. They would respect his courage for saying what so many of them have been thinking since Donald Trump thumped Kamala Harris in the presidential election. They would be urging him publicly to run for president. A billionaire, perhaps in Silicon Valley or New York, would have launched a super PAC called Moulton 2028, calling the congressman the voice America needs. They would love him. But in this universe, the one we actually inhabit, they hate him. We've worked so hard at becoming tolerant that we've become intolerant, Moulton, who represents the suburbs north of Boston, told me Wednesday. The hate started 2 weeks ago when Moulton told the New York Times in an article explaining why Kamala Harris lost that the Democratic Party had become overly focused on trans issues. Quote, Democrats spend too much time trying not to offend anyone rather than being brutally honest about the challenges many Americans face. I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, but as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Moulton's daughters are 6 and 3, and he told me he was talking about team sports they might play when they're older. When I asked what prompted him to make comments that he must have known would antagonize his fellow Democrats, who have long adhered to the orthodoxy that trans women are women who should be able to compete in girls' sports, he replied, I was speaking authentically as a dad about a concern that I know other dads share, and we just ought to be able to debate it. Since then, he's been referred to as a Nazi cooperator, transphobic, and offensive. Democrats have said he should resign. His campaign manager stepped down. Democratic Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, who is gay, attacked Moulton for playing politics. Jake Auchincloss, who, like Moulton, is a former Marine and now a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts, distanced himself from Moulton's trans remarks. Meanwhile, the chair of Tufts University's political science department threatened to bar students from interning in Moulton's office, which prompted the college's high command to assure the congressman they still like him. Tufts is a major recipient of National Institutes of Health grants, probably not wise to lash out at a member of the Massachusetts delegation. 66% of Americans oppose trans girls in sports, boys in girls' sports. James Carville, over the weekend, was talking on MSNBC on Morning Joe. I guess it was this morning. And I want to play you this audio from James Carville.
Well, let's start. Back in March, I said that I thought Democratic campaign culture had, quote, too many preachy females, unquote. Well, they all had a conniption. If you looked at the male vote that we got in November, no one since November has come up and said a thing to me. Primarily, we have a large problem with males. And I'm not just talking about white males like you and I'm talking about males all across. And we need to address that. And we don't need to be shouted down by Washington liberal advocacy groups at NPR. We got to say we got a male problem and we need to get to work on it. And I think we can.
You can, but not when you shout down a guy like Seth Moulton. Moulton is a liberal. Moulton believes in gay rights. He believes in all the things that progressives say they want: diversity, equality, and inclusion. But he's also a dad. He's also got common sense, and he doesn't believe boys should be in girls' sports. That even after a boy transitions to being a girl, there's still a physical, biological advantage based on muscle mass, bone density, and the like. And this isn't disputed by real scientists. The only scientists who dispute it are the ones who have PhDs in women and gender studies. And yet he's now being vilified for speaking the truth. April Ryan, again, progressive reporter. She's on this panel discussion this morning. Listen to this as the Democrats try to diagnose their losses.
Well, and April Ryan, I mean, that's a lot of people are sitting there going, wait a second, why are Democrats losing working class white voters? Why are Democrats losing working class Hispanic voters? Why are Democrats even losing some working class black voters, especially black men? It was overstated about black men, the degree, but there's no doubt there is a trend that Democrats are losing a lot of people that have been their base for a long time. Why do you think that is?
Tone deafness. At this point, you have to think about this. Politics is personal and it's also pocketbook. This is not new, though, for Black America, for Latino America, for those who are underserved. Think about the 1960s. Think about the March on Washington with Dr. King. Think about if Robert Kennedy Sr. and Dr. Martin Luther King would have lived, they would have dealt with issues of poverty. And one thing that I did ask Robert Kennedy Jr. at the debate in Philadelphia, after the debate in the spin room, I said, what if your father and Dr. King had lived, they were dealing with the issue of poverty? Who is the president that would deal with that issue more so than the other? And he said, Donald Trump. which was surprising to hear that, as Democrats are thought to be the ones who deal with this. And they are imploding now because of this, because of the tone deafness that so many people have told them about, and they didn't listen.
A tone deafness. It's not that they were tone deaf, it's that they didn't listen. They didn't listen. They didn't listen on the economy. They lectured people and told them they had it good. They haven't listened to people about trans rights. And in fact, I didn't bother with any of the audio. Every Sunday show yesterday vilified Nancy Mace for wanting to keep Sarah McBride, the man from Delaware who has transitioned, is now a trans woman member of Congress, wanted to keep him out of women's bathrooms, and they all vilified her. Lectured censoriousness of the Democrats. They've got real problems. They've got real problems. They are smug. They do believe that history is on their side. They like that line. And yet, history's not on their side. History's not really on anybody's side, for that matter. But the reality is that the Democrats, they're not willing to listen to the working class. They're not willing to listen to men. They are obsessed with elite gay men and neurotic white women. And in fact, I go back to after the election was over. I talked to a senior Democratic strategist, every single one of you would know. And he and multiple other Democrats venting to me about the election and Kamala Harris's loss said that the Democratic Party has been hijacked by wealthy gay men and neurotic white women, and that's what the party caters to. They don't know how to message to men. Remember the Jimmy Kimmel writer who did the video of I'm a man and I'm going to vote for women. It was the most absurd thing. It wasn't a Kamala Harris thing. It was tied to Kamala Harris, but it wasn't. It was a comedy writer for Jimmy Kimmel. But those are the sorts of people who are the ones trying to message to men, and it just simply doesn't work. They are completely out to lunch on this. And when James Carville said at the time, we got too many of these preachy women out there talking, he was crucified by Democrats, and he was right. The lecturing tones from NPR and the like have turned off men, but not just men. And that's, I think, the data that people miss. A majority, not a plurality, a majority of married women voted for Donald Trump in this election. A majority of married women voted for Donald Trump. That is the same data that shows us how massive the swing for men for Donald Trump was. Majority of married women voted for Mitt Romney, too, in 2012. And it was kind of a harbinger of bad things to come for the Democrats when a majority of married women voted Republican in 2012, just as it is now in 2024. It's because the Democrats are losing families. And there are still more people who wish to have families in this country than don't. And those people, they're the ones who are on the right side of history because they are building the legacies of history through building families. When you've lost families, which Democrats have, you've lost America. That reporter who's fleeing the country, it's his side who's lost the country. It's his side who's become intolerant. It's his side who's become censorious. But Democrats never, ever, ever have to learn history because they never have to learn the past because they're always about the future, and they never, ever see themselves as the villains, even though in this case, they're the bad guys, and they're the ones Americans rejected. And instead of having any sort of humility, they've decided to just blame everybody else. Now, you will blame yourself if you don't go take advantage of this great deal at EdenPureDeals.com and you put in discount code ERICK3, ERICK3. You can get 3 of the brand new Eden Pure Thunderstorms for less than $200. You save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERICK3, ERICK3. So what is the Eden Pure Thunderstorm? Well, it's an air purifier. So it gets rid of dust, pollen, pet dander, all that floating in the air. But where it really shines is it's an odor eliminator. it generates ozone. And ozone, as you probably are aware, latches onto odor ions. So the way an odor comes about is a particle generates an ion. Those ions are attracted to the receptors in your nose, and when they touch the receptors, your brain signals, oh, this is an odor, this is what it smells like. So the Eden Pure thunderstorm generates ozone that touches those odor ions before they make it to your nose and eliminates them. So it eliminates the odor, period, because your nose receptors can't get that ion, so it's gone. But now what it also does is it generates plasma, so bacteria and viruses are also eliminated. So it gets rid of odors, it gets rid of bacteria, it gets rid of viruses, it gets rid of pet dander, it gets rid of pollen, gets rid of dust, and you can get 3 of them for less than $200 and save $200. All you do, you go to EdenPureDeals.com and you put in the discount code ERICK3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. Talk about the cabinet picks. There are some good ones, some questionable ones, some clunkers. What is interesting to me is the spin. You know, first everyone was they were assuring me Donald Trump was doing 4-dimensional chess. And they know there's no 4-dimensional chess. And now people are like, it doesn't matter anyway, particularly because of the labor secretary pick. The Treasury secretary pick is an interesting one to me. The Treasury secretary pick essentially waged a campaign for it behind the scenes. And he is actually someone who worked for George Soros. Now, if you're a longtime listener to this program, you know I am on record saying that George Soros is to the right what the Koch brothers are to the left, and often overstated boogeyman who everybody blames everything on. And in this case, from what I have been very reliably told, Scott Bessent did work for George Soros. Worked directly for George Soros, but also his tenure at Soros's investment firm is overstated by people. I personally just have fun needling all the people who complain about Soros all the time that Trump is now hiring a guy who worked for Soros and maintains ties to Soros. But if you know anything about George Soros, not his son Alex, who's very much progressive, George Soros may not be with us on social and cultural issues, but George Soros is very much a libertarian when it comes to money. Scott Bessent is also a big fundraiser in 2000 for Al Gore. He's raised money for Hillary Clinton, John Kerry. He's raised money for Barack Obama. He is openly gay. He'd be the first openly gay Treasury Secretary. A strong advocate for gay rights, for marriage equality. He is married. They do have children. They live in Charleston, South Carolina. He's 62 years old. What I am told by free marketeers is that there is no better person to be Treasury Secretary at this time in the United States. Friends of mine, deeply evangelical Christians in the financial investment world, say this is a strong pick, that Scott Bessent is a good pick. And not only is he a good pick, but he's a pick that will undermine and work against the ideas of tariffs, knowing that they're bad, which works for me. The weird one for me is what happened on Friday when every news outlet in America seems was saying my friend Kelly Loeffler would be picked as the Ag Secretary. Reported it on this program, did an entire monologue about her and Doug Collins, who will be the highly qualified Veterans Affairs Secretary. And then when it was made formal by Trump on Saturday, it was Brooke Rollins, or Sunday, I guess it was. Brooke Rollins is actually a friend of mine. Brooke is going to be great, too. Brooke was the head of the Texas Public Policy Foundation for a while, the best think tank in the country, and she'll be the Ag Secretary. Kelly Loeffler not. Now, I texted former Senator Loeffler on Friday, tell her congratulations, and never heard back. And then yesterday was texting a friend with the Trump transition team, and he says the problem is all the conflicts. Not personal conflicts or things like that, but so the Loefflers own the New York Stock Exchange. The Ag Secretary oversees commodities trading, and the levels of conflicts that would arise would be too great. They couldn't find a way around it. That was their explanation. It sounds legit, just given the Agriculture Department is in charge of commodities trading, and there would be conflicts of interest there. That seems to be it. Was assured that they want to find a place for her in the administration, but that one there would be too many conflicts, and so they went with Brooke Rollins at the end. The lawyers couldn't figure out a way. That's what I'm told. I'll go with it unless someone tells me something else. But it was credible. The bad pick is Chavez-DeRemer. Congresswoman Chavez-DeRemer from Oregon will be the labor secretary. Now, before you tell me, and this is the spin now, originally it was Donald Trump is doing 4D chess with Matt Gaetz until he ditched Matt Gaetz less than a week after his nomination for Pam Bondi, who you don't need 4D chess for. She's highly qualified and will be great. But with Chavez-DeRemer, she's such a terrible pick. All the people who said Donald Trump was engaged in 4D chess are now saying, it doesn't matter. He's in charge. Who cares? Except there's a problem with that. One, Chavez-DeRemer and all these other picks will be in the presidential line of succession. But two, she is a uniquely terrible pick. And in fact, I will predict she's going to get more Democrat votes than Republican votes for labor secretary. Chavez-DeRemer is one of the most progressive Republicans in Washington, D.C. She has repeatedly been the sole Republican to sponsor the DREAM Act with Democrats. She supports amnesty for illegal immigrants. This matters because she'll be in charge of labor regulations relating to the use of illegal immigrants in the workforce. And she is a big proponent of Washington turning a blind eye towards companies using illegal aliens. Not only that, the National Education Association and Randy Weingarten from the American Federation of Teachers are out singing her praises. She is the only Republican, again, she's the only Republican to support the DREAM Act. She's the only Republican to oppose school choice in the House of Representatives. The labor secretary nominee, Chavez-DeRemer, is deeply, deeply pro-union and anti-parent. She opposes school choice. Now, you could say that's the Department of Education. That's fine. But considering the labor unions are supporting her and the teachers unions are supporting her, you should raise an eyebrow about this. So she supports amnesty for illegal aliens. She opposes school choice. She supports government unionization. She not only supports government unionization, that is, government employees unionizing, she is one of a very few members of Congress, including among Democrats, who support the right of government employees to strike. Even most Democrats don't support the right of government employees to go on strike. She does. Not only does she support the right of government employees to go on strike, she actually supports the PRO Act. The PRO Act is a massive progressive plan to force every employee of every private sector business in this country to be in a union. It would roll back right-to-work laws in states. Right-to-work laws, you know, the states that are the most economically prosperous are right-to-work states. They don't force individuals into unions. She actually wants to get rid of right-to-work status and force employees into unions in the private sector. Doesn't want to give them a choice, wants to force them in there. This is who Donald Trump wants as his labor secretary. You can't tell me this doesn't matter, because when Trump was president the first time and then when Biden was president, it's the labor secretary who signed the rules for mandatory COVID vaccines for employees. It's the labor secretary who did that. It's the labor secretary whose regulations and signature ordered the closure of businesses during COVID. It's the labor secretary who did these things. The labor secretary is a powerful position in Washington, D.C. And handing the labor secretary over to someone as far left as Chavez-DeRemer, even Republican senators are upset about it. You know who's happy? Patty Murray, the Democratic senator from Washington State, is a big fan. Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers is a big fan. The head of the Teamsters is a big fan. The head of the AFL-CIO is a big fan. And the head of the SEIU is a big fan. The head of the government, the Postal Workers Union, is a big fan. That should be a big red flag for everybody else. It's a terrible pick. I thought Kennedy was bad. She's worse. And I'm sure there will be someone there. So, it is 40 justice to get Kennedy through. No, she's just a bad pick. Hegseth, I actually continue to think is a good pick. And you know, the police report on him is somewhat overstated. So here are the facts as I now understand them on this arrest report. Haig says, by the way, it is a big red flag. He didn't report this to the Trump transition team, and he's going to have to explain himself on this. But according to the data, according to the report itself, Hegseth was drunk at an event out west, hitting on a bunch of women. This particular woman was defending the other women. She went with Pete Hegseth to his room. He, again, drunk. She sober. Her husband and kids were there with her. Goes to the room. They have sex. 4 days later, she says it was an assault, but then doesn't want to press charges. There's something off there. She was sober. He was drunk. This happened. She filed a police report and then refused to press charges. There's something off there. He needs to explain this, but I suspect this is explainable. He's an interesting pick. Marco Rubio is a great pick for Secretary of State. Pam Bondi is a great pick for Attorney General. We got some great picks, but some of them undeniably clunkers. Yeah, look, I'm of all the people who could have been there, look, the friends I know and respect saying that he's the best guy, I'm going to go with them. And you're right that I've said this before that it's like the Koch brothers on the left. We vilify Soros, and he's become the boogeyman for all sorts of stuff. But to some degree, I think that allows us a way to escape being accountable for our own competence or incompetence in the same way on the left. Instead of having to say we screwed stuff up, they can say, oh, well, the Koch brothers did it. We shouldn't be hiding behind George Soros all the time to get out of our own failures. But, I mean, people are going to do it. I do have to say, though, Nate, I do find it funny that there has been such vocal criticism of the swamp, the establishment, and Donald Trump's going to purge the swamp and all this stuff. It is actually kind of funny that he settled on a guy who did work for George Soros. There is a level of humorous irony in there, even if I don't think we should hold that against him. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Look, I appreciate the phone call, Nate. You're right. It is. It's going to be a very interesting setup. By the way, the Republicans in the Senate are very much in favor of this guy as Treasury Secretary, and several of them breathed a sigh of relief, I'm told, when he put Howard Lutnick in Commerce, because Lutnick is a big advocate of tariffs, and Bessent is not. I'm also told that Bessent actually has Trump's ear behind the scenes because Trump likes that he's not a showboat. A lot of these guys want to be in front of cameras, and they want to be in front of microphones. And this guy is not a showboat. He's very quiet. He only speaks when he feels like he needs to speak. And so Trump seems very comfortable with him for Treasury Secretary. But, man, y'all, this Labor Secretary, between Kennedy and Chavez-DeRemer, we got some clunkers in the Trump administration. But, the spin has gone from 4D chess to it doesn't matter, except they're in the presidential line of succession, and they do have legislative powers themselves beyond those delegated to the president from Congress. Breaking news. Welcome back. It's Erick Erickson here. There is breaking news. Jack Smith has officially filed to dismiss the case of United States of America versus Donald J. Trump. As a result of the election held on November 5, 2024, the defendant Donald J. Trump will be inaugurated as president on January 20th, 2025. It has long been the position of the Department of Justice that the United States Constitution forbids the federal indictment and subsequent criminal prosecution of a sitting president. But the department and the country have never faced the circumstance here, where a federal indictment against a private citizen has been returned by a grand jury and a criminal prosecution is already underway when the defendant is elected president. Confronted with the unprecedented situation, the special counsel's office consulted with the department's Office of Legal Counsel, whose interpretation of constitutional issues such as those raised here is binding on department prosecutors. After careful consideration, the department has determined that the Office of Legal Counsel's prior opinions concerning the Constitution's prohibition on federal indictment and prosecution of a sitting president apply to this situation, and that as a result, this prosecution must be dismissed before the defendant is inaugurated. That is signed by Jack Smith himself, special counsel. The government requesting that under the federal rules of criminal procedure, the case be dismissed without prejudice of the superseding indictment. Now, As a lawyer, I can tell you the dismissal without prejudice of the superseding indictment means they want the ability to bring it back after he's gone again. If it's dismissed with prejudice, it means they can never bring it up again. By bringing it as dismissal without prejudice of the superseding indictment, it means they want to be able to bring it back up later. Say a legal sleight of hand he's using. But the breaking news happening right now, Jack Smith filing for dismissal of the cases against Donald Trump. Now, I need to call your attention to Old Glory Bank. They are my bank. I have a checking account with them. I have a savings account with them. If you're a business and you're looking for a bank that you can do business with that's not going to cancel you because you're conservative, Old Glory Bank was started by conservatives for conservatives, and they are totally willing to have your bank. Have your back. They would love your business. In fact, I've now sent 6 businesses, was 5, now it's 6 different businesses to Old Glory Bank, and all of them have loved dealing with them. They can do loans. If you're an individual, you can do mortgages, you can do car loans. If you're a business, you can do business loans. They are great for businesses, great for individuals. All you have to do is go to oldglorybank.com. oldglorybank.com. You can fill out the entirety of your application online and get started online. oldglorybank.com, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply, and I have beaten CNN on the breaking news. I want you to know they're just now cutting in. Or just tuning in, for the record, I want it known, and it's all thanks to my team, particularly Charlie, who flagged it for me early. I beat the news networks in delivering you the breaking news. This is why you should be listening to me live across America instead of waiting for the podcast. Hint, hint. Well, also why I should be on more radio stations. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, has dismissed the case against Donald Trump. Now, what is notable and what's going to probably get glossed over by a lot of people when they read his dismissal, and by the way, they say they are dismissing it because of historic precedent from the Department of Justice and the advice from the Office of Legal Counsel at the DOJ that because a sitting president cannot be prosecuted, the incoming president should not be prosecuted by the federal government. He's dismissing without prejudice. That's what he's asking for, a dismissal without prejudice. Now, if you're not a lawyer, I happen to be one, where I used to be. I'm in the 12-step program. There are 2 phrases, with prejudice and without prejudice. If you dismiss with prejudice, means you can never, ever, ever bring the case back. If you dismiss without prejudice, it means you can bring it back at a later date. And in fact, the language in the Jack Smith dismissal is to dismiss without prejudice to the underlying indictment. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, it means that once Donald Trump is no longer president of the United States, that the Department of Justice would have the power, since there's already an indictment filed. So we've hit the statute of limitations freezes now because of the indictment. You got to be indicted before the statute of limitations. You don't have to be brought to trial before the statute of limitations. So because he's been indicted, there's no longer a statute of limitations issue. And the result is that the government can bring back the indictment at a later date. I don't think that'll actually happen, but that's where we're headed. There happens to be breaking news right now. In addition to that story, the Israeli cabinet has announced that they will vote on a ceasefire over Lebanon tomorrow. All indications are that Israel is going to agree to a ceasefire with Hezbollah that has been negotiated by the United States and France. One of the conditions was the French to improve their relations with Israel. It's kind of a weird fluke. The U.S. and France help fund the Lebanese army that is not Hezbollah. And France, Lebanon used to be part of French territory, has maintained long ties to Lebanon. And the French and the Americans together were involved in this. So 2 bits of breaking news happening right now as we're live on the program. Jack Smith dismisses without prejudice the case against Trump, meaning he can be resurrected after he leaves office. And the Israeli cabinet is set to vote for a ceasefire plan tomorrow with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, We can move on to what I was actually going to talk about now that we've gotten rid of all the breaking news. There is a story in the Times of London. Donald Trump is planning an executive order that would lead to the removal of all transgender members of the United States military, defense sources say. The order could come on his first day back in the White House, January 20th, 2025. There are believed to be about 15,000 active service personnel who are transgender. They would be medically discharged, which would determine that they were unfit to serve. It would also lead to a ban on trans people joining the military and would come at a time when almost all branches of the American Armed Forces are failing to meet recruiting targets. See how they change and shift in their game of three-card Monte. Why is he doing this? We need all the recruits we can get. Well, you're not getting recruits in the American military because Obama politicized it. And what people are yelling about now is that somehow Donald Trump is going to politicize the military. All Donald Trump is doing is depoliticizing the military from when Barack Obama was president. Now, I know this will come as a rude awakening to people who believe history began 5 minutes ago. But Barack Obama viewed the military essentially as no longer a fighting force because there would be no more war. Remember, when Barack Obama got elected, he said, this is when the earth began to heal. We are the change we were waiting for.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
And that's what he believed, and that's what he argued, and he believed that peace would come not through the military, but through talks and diplomacy. And so the military instead, the left has perpetuated this notion that the military was a force for changing the culture, that the military integrated, and that forced integration into the United States. Actually, it was Democratic President Woodrow Wilson who forcefully segregated the military. It was war and World War II and soldiers coming back to this country and facing the adversity and segregation that really pushed the country to desegregate. It wasn't just by virtue of the military, but the left and Barack Obama have this idea that the military should be used to advance civil justice reforms in the United States, that they used integration in this country as an example, that they needed more gay people in the military. They needed more black leaders in the military. And in fact, Barack Obama, behind the scenes, politicized the military such that in the Marine Corps in particular, they decided they needed to advance promotions based on skin color, that they needed to desegregate the Marines, they claimed, and in so doing, they needed to advance black personnel. It didn't work out well for them, frankly. The Marines, to this day, have largely rejected race-based promotions. But they've tried with the Air Force, they've tried with the Navy, they've tried with the Army. The Marines are the only one at this point that are meeting recruiting goals, and that's not a secret because the Marines are the only ones not woke. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force go through DEI training now. Again, it is the left that has politicized the military, and all Donald Trump wants to do is get rid of the politicization, and he's now being accused of politicizing the military by getting rid of all the woke progressive crap that's there. There is a reason to get rid of trans soldiers. I support it, not because I oppose transgenderism. I support Donald Trump's ban for a very practical reason. Talk to the soldiers on the front lines. Trans soldiers can't go to war. I bet you haven't heard this. You're not going to get it from ABC, CBS, or NBC, or even CNN, where they're belly aching about this. Trans soldiers can't go to war. Can't be on the front lines. So they're taking positions that other people might serve because they can't go to the front lines because of the medicines, the drugs, I've heard this now from leaders within the military, not just from activists, but from actual members of the military tell me one of the things that never gets reported is that transgender soldiers, because of the hormones they take, they're not going to be stationed on the front lines. So they're taking spots that other people might fill while also ensuring they never actually go to the front lines, and the government covers the costs of their treatment. It is members of the military themselves. It is generals, lieutenants, colonels, all of whom are very upset with the woke transitioning of the military by Obama and by Biden because it never has made sense. It has never made sense to the fact that you can't actually put these people on front lines given the costs and treatments that they require to maintain their transitions in life. Again, I'm not an expert, but when I have a general tell me this, I tend to pay attention to the general who's deeply frustrated with the politicization of the Democrats and the military. And this is not a pro-Trump general that I've talked to. Donald Trump wants to reform the military, and it's not just the trans issue. Our military is badly underperforming. Over the weekend, I got an email. Let me see if I can find this for you. Where is this email over the weekend? It is wild how much the American military is falling behind. The American military is unable to build ships. The American military is behind in development of the next generation of fighter jets. The F-35 program is badly flawed. We don't have the ability to maintain those aircraft regularly or reliably. We do not have the ability to build the new submarine class that the Navy wants. We can't build ships, and in fact, the Navy has actually just decided to cancel its multi-purpose ship because the military got it in its head that you could have one plane for all branches of the military and one ship that could be served multi-purposes of the military, and they can't maintain the ship. It constantly breaks down. The F-35 fighter jet doesn't actually serve the purposes that it needs. They can't keep the skin on the plane, let alone keep it in the air. It may be highly advanced technologically, but it's served as a boondoggle in the military, and this is where Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex comes in. What a lot of people have interpreted Eisenhower's remarks to be about was that we would essentially be in perpetual war so that the military-industrial complex could constantly make revenue. That's not actually what he meant. What Eisenhower actually meant was that the military and industry together would set policies, and in that collaboration between industry and military, we would be doing what's good for the industry ultimately and not what's good for the military. And that is exactly what's happened to us as we've misinterpreted what Eisenhower was warning about. We are subsidizing Boeing and Lockheed. We're not actually building world-class fighter jets because they look, by all intents and purposes, to be world-class, but we can't keep them in the air. We're building world-class nuclear attack submarines, but we can't keep them under the water without them leaking. We're building world-class ships, but we can't keep them in the water without sinking. So what good are they? Meanwhile, China continues to advance its technology. China continues to outpace us in ship construction, and China is beginning to figure out nuclear-powered submarines. I didn't realize how far behind they were with nuclear power when it comes to their Navy, but they're catching up quick. The dictates of our military are not dictates based on the wars we might face, but based on what the industrial complex wants to build. And part of the industrial complex has gotten so progressive that they're willing to introduce woke politics into the military, and that is putting us behind. Donald Trump wants to clean that up. If Pete Hegseth can do it, I say let him. We're falling further and further behind on technology, and China is beginning to catch up quick. And it is a dangerous, dangerous situation for us to be in where the Chinese are catching up very fast to us on technologies that they should not be anywhere near us catching up on. The Pentagon has become extremely dysfunctional. The United States is confronting the most serious and challenging threats since the end of World War II, and our Pentagon is just spending money, making no sense of what to do with it. And if you want perspective from a budgetary perspective, Our gross domestic product during the Korean War was 14% GDP. In 1968, it was 9.3 GDP. At the peak of Reagan rebuilding our military, it was 6.2%, and now it's less than 3%, and we're not getting any quality from that 3%. We need a bigger defense budget, but we need better quality too. We're not getting it. We're instead getting woke politics. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here across the United States. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, very happy to have you with me. You can text Erick, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. Get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, so much more. In particular, however, if you text the word Erick, text the word recipe, singular, no S, recipe, to 33777. You can get my cookbook. It's a very small PDF for you of all the things I make. I made the chocolate pie last night. I'll be smoking a turkey. I'll be making gumbo. There's a lot of stuff in there. My gravy recipe is what you want, though. My friend Julie texted me or emailed, and she said, your gravy is fantastic. She's making it. Here's the thing. So I have a gravy recipe. It's a very easy to do gravy recipe. But one of the things that I despise about cookbooks is they tell you to brown the onion for 5 minutes. You can't brown an onion in 5 minutes, people. It takes 20 minutes on medium heat in butter to get the onions the way you want to get the onions. And then you don't taste an overwhelming onion flavor. You taste a sweet flavor, and it adds some texture. And so the gravy recipe, all I'm telling you, is like 20 minutes on medium heat. You stir those onions. They're going to brown. They're going to shrink up into nothing, and it's going to give you a great flavor. Now, here's the key to avoid the lumpy gravy for your holidays. You put the flour into the butter or the fat, whatever you're using, whether it's oil or butter or beef tallow, doesn't matter. You put your flour in the fat and you stir it around. Before you add a liquid, you put your flour into the fat. Why? The flour absorbs the fat and it begins to brown. The longer it goes, the less thickening power it has. So you don't want to spend a lot of time stirring your flour, just a couple of minutes to get the raw flour flavor out. And then you add your liquid. If you add the liquid too soon, you're going to get clumpy gravy. That's the secret to avoiding clumpy gravy. You put the flour in, let it stir around for a couple of minutes, get the clumps out, it soaks up all the fat, and then it can't clump up. And if you've only stirred it for a couple minutes with a whisk, then it's also still going to thicken. The longer, this is the thing with a gumbo. All a gumbo is flour and oil, but you stir it for so long, it loses its thickening power. That's why you then add filet or okra. All I'm saying, avoid lumpy gravy, get my recipe, but you spend 20 minutes with those onions, cut them small, spend 20 minutes with them. You're going to thank me later. It's the best gravy recipe. Just text the word recipe, singular, recipe, to 33777. Click through that link. You'll see it. My holiday recipes. Get the gravy. You'll thank me later. Stop ruining your gravy on Thanksgiving. There's no excuse for lumpy gravy. I make it easy for you. Okay. We can move on. We have to move on. We have other news. Reviewing the breaking news real quick. The cabinet in Israel will be voting tomorrow on a peace plan for Lebanon. And Jack Smith has filed to dismiss his prosecutions of Donald Trump, the classified documents case and the January 6th case. He's moving to dismiss all of them. Also, Damian Williams has resigned. He is the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. He has prosecuted Eric Adams, Bob Menendez, Sean Puffy Combs. The current Deputy U.S. Attorney, Edward Kim, will take his place until the Trump nomination. And Trump is nominating the former SEC Chairman, Jay Clayton, to become his U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Now, what happens typically in this situation, this isn't some sort of scandal. People are making this out to be a big scandal. at the end of presidential administrations, a lot of U.S. attorneys will leave so their deputies can take on the title, because it will help their deputies once they become the U.S. attorney in their later career to get better jobs if they've been even an acting U.S. attorney. So out of good grace, a lot of them do this. There's no scandal there that I know of. But this guy has been a pretty prolific prosecutor in New York, and he is out. We need to talk about black women. That's a transition, isn't it? No subtlety in that transition, Erickson. You're just going straight from the prosecutor, here's the breaking news, so let's talk about black women. I have a lot of black women who listen to my program, I want you to know. And they all call in. They have strongly held opinions. Kenya Hunter of the Associated Press did this story. Here's the headline: feeling betrayed by increased minority support for Trump. Black women say they're stepping back. As she checked into a recent flight from Mexico for vacation, Teja Smith chuckled at the idea of joining another women's march in Washington. As a black woman, she just couldn't see herself helping to replicate the largest act of resistance against then-President Donald Trump's first term in January of 2017, even in an election year this year where Trump questioned his opponent's race, held rallies featuring racist insults, and falsely claimed black migrants in Ohio were eating residents' pets. He didn't just win a second term. He became the first president in 2 decades to clinch the popular vote, although by a small margin. Stop. Stop. Donald Trump never claimed black migrants in Ohio were eating residents' pets. They were Haitians. That matters. He wasn't claiming that migrants from Zambia or Gabon or the Democratic Republic of Congo or Rwanda or anywhere else that has black-skinned migrants were eating pets. It happened to be Haiti. This article, in and of itself, is as loaded as it could possibly be. It's like the people have spoken, and this is what America looks like, says Teja Smith, the Los Angeles-based founder of the advocacy social media network Get Social. And there's not so much more fighting that you're going to be able to do without losing your own sanity. After Trump was declared the winner over Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris, many politically engaged black women said they were so dismayed by the outcome that they were reassessing their enthusiasm for electoral politics and movement organizing. Have you people never met a black woman who's a Republican? Y'all should come to Atlanta. A lady, you, by the way, you're based in Atlanta, apparently. Go meet Janelle King, please. There are plenty of black conservative women in America, and a lot of them listen to this program. This obsessive racial focus is one reason that the Democrats lost, that the Associated Press seems to think that all black women are Democrats and they're going to unplug from this country because Donald Trump won is fatuous nonsense. It is simply not true. Politically engaged black women are not a monolith of the Democratic Party. It is certainly true. It is certainly true that there are more black women who vote Democrat than Republican, but that has way more to do with the fact that they're Democrat, not that they're black. There are historic reasons the black vote is leaning Democrat in this country, and it's beginning to shift. But the focus, you can tell the tip-off right there when she talks about a black migrants in Springfield, Ohio, eating residents' pets. No, it was very specifically Haitian migrants who were eating the pets, and they weren't eating the pets, by the way. Turns out not to be true, but there were all sorts of problems. So many problems, as a matter of fact, that the Democrats assured us, Donald Trump was going to lose it. In fact, for the very first time, he won Springfield, Ohio. Why? Because the residents of Springfield, Ohio did not like the idea of overwhelming their city with migrants from Haiti, changing the social character of their town, and burdening social services in their town. And the media said that was all nonsense. It turns out not to be nonsense. It was the truth the whole time. They just lied about it because they couldn't fathom telling Americans the truth about Joe Biden's political situation and his public policies. Y'all, if you're giving up on America like the guy who's moved to Northern Ireland or the supposed mass array of black women who are just sitting back and tapping out, if you've got all Joy Reid that black men are racist, they're racist. Maybe you just need to step out of politics altogether because you're nuts. I need you to hear me. And I say this lovingly. But you are a world-class moron if you think that Donald Trump is going to impose authoritarianism in the United States. If you think this country is racist because a coalition, a multi-ethnic, multiracial coalition voted for Donald Trump, you're an idiot. Note to the Trump supporters who say I disparage them all the time. Well, I'm not talking about you right now, am I? I'm talking about these idiots on the other side. We got idiots on all sides. People are stupid. And some very, very stupid people have bought into the idea that Donald Trump being elected president would be some sort of cataclysmic event in this country. Well, it certainly is for progressives now, but you just had a incoming president of the United States put a pro-abortion activist in charge of the Department of Health and Human Services and a pro-union activist in charge of the Labor Department. Things don't look really bad for anybody out there unless you're a dyed-in-the-wool conservative like me. You people are idiots, though. I got to tell you, the racial framing in this country, and this is part of the brokenness in our media, is how everything must be framed racially. Everything must be framed in a narrative. There's no fact-based telling of stories anymore. It's all, we got to find an antagonist and a protagonist, and the protagonist is always someone on the intersectional spectrum who is not a white man. And the antagonist is always a white man. Jim Van Dyke got an award. He's the head of Axios, the left-wing news site that uses the phrases unhoused and pregnant person as opposed to homeless and pregnant woman. And listen to him, his speech at the National Press Club where he's getting an award.
Everything we do is under fire. Elon Musk sits on Twitter every day, or X today, saying like, we are the media, you are the media. My message to Elon Musk is, bullshit. You're not the media. You having a blue check mark, a Twitter handle, and 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter any more than me looking at your head and seeing that you have a brain and telling you have an awesome set of tools makes me a damn neurosurgeon, right? Like what we do, what journalists do, what you did in Mississippi, what Al Jazeera does in the Middle East. You don't proclaim yourself to be a reporter. Like that's nonsense.
The arrogance of these people. During the Bush administration, writing at redstate.com, as a young guy, just gotten married, and I broke the news of who George Bush's picks to the Supreme Court would be. I was the very first person to tell people his original pick, Harriet Miers, had given money to Al Gore. I broke the news. You know, reporters at the New York Times and others, they sourced the news to me. They never mentioned my name because I wasn't a reporter. I beat them to the scoop. These are arrogant people. Arrogant people. They think the First Amendment freedom of the press belongs to them, not to everyone. And they're doing these stories at the Associated Press about black women sitting out of politics because they didn't win. Their side didn't win. It's not all black women. It is an arrogance of the press to cover these stories the way they do. And they're losing. They're losing eyeballs. They're losing viewers. They're losing readers because of their arrogance, because they believe that they have they're the gatekeepers of truth. They're not. They're just a bunch of broken partisan progressives who just got their butt kicked in the election, and they don't know how to handle it. And now they're trying to run these silly stories, repackaging 2024 in a racial frame of mind because that's all they know how to do, which is exactly why they're losing. I'm going to spend a little more time tomorrow, probably at the beginning of the show, talking about Thanksgiving. But I do want to say something. It's been on my mind, the shift in men to the GOP. And this culture of politically active young men that I see that are Theo bro, Jim bro. It's like they all go to the same barber. They have become very homogenized. It's very weird, actually. And it's very bro culture. I need to say this, and it's something I tell my son. I was listening to a sermon the other day that on this as well. You know, when the ark, or Noah and the ark, his sons and sons' wives and his wife, they received safe passage on the ark, not because of anything they did, but because of what Noah did. Noah found favor in God's eyes. Whether you think it's a myth, a story, or real, I'm in the it's real camp. The fact of the matter is there's a lesson to be learned that your character does matter. And particularly young men who are becoming more and more politically active, if you view life as you got to own the left, you're doing it wrong. Your kids find no safe passage on an ark because you own the left. They find safe passage because you found favor in God's eyes. And as you young guys are getting in politics, I just want you to be more and more mindful of the fact that character has to count for something. If you don't have good character, if you're not someone people can put their trust in, if you're not someone people who disagree with you can learn from, you're not going to end well, and your family's not going to end well. So as you move forward and you sit around at Thanksgiving, don't own the left around the kitchen table. Instead, celebrate your family for Thanksgiving. That's what matters most. Now, Americans for Prosperity has been out knocking on doors around the country, trying to get people involved in the process. And they use an army of volunteers across the country who engage people where they are, and they engage conversationally. They give you the facts and the data to make a persuasive case for common sense conservative reform, but they also teach you how to relate to people where they are without lecturing them. I would love for you to join up with AFP. They can make you a highly effective conservative activist, and they have chapters in just about every state. What you do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Look, you're at the end of the season. In politics, the election is over. The fight always continues. You want to be as effective as you can. Americans for Prosperity can help you. Go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Sign up with AFP. Get all the facts and figures you need on how to advance free market conservative reforms in this country. They'd love to have you. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer.